My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who has tried some of the most important cases in recent American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectreVision Radio.
When you have a sec, please rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Thank you from the bottom of our dark little hearts. From the cold ashes of yesterday, something stirs. A chill in the air, a whisper in the dark. Like a hand clawing its way out of forgotten soil, we have risen from the dead. We're here pulling back the curtain between the living and the unknown. The clock ticks strange this hour, and not everything that's buried stays buried. Stories long dormant are waking, shadows are stretching, and the veil thinner than ever. Light a candle in your dark room, but keep your wits about you. You need to remember, the dead don't always rest. Welcome to the world beyond the veil. This is Geist.
The way I always do this is I just shuffle until something falls or sticks out like that.
What did we get? 2 of Cups.
2 of Cups. So I'm trying to learn tarot. I'm a real novice. So I pull 1 card a day and I study it. Let me see if I can do this without looking. So 2 is like the beginning of a journey, I think. So like the 1 or the ace is like you're getting ready to go on a journey. And the 2 is like, you've taken the first step. There's some symmetry to it. It's kind of, could be you and me, maybe, right?
That is wild.
And Cups is emotion. So without looking, yeah, this feels like a perfect card for what we're about to do.
Adore that you pulled that. That's amazing.
Is this two people at the beginning of a journey, sort of sharing their emotional states.
Yeah, I fucking love that.
My name is Danielle Matar. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I was born in 1972. I lived there until I was about 19 years old. I was raised in a family of artists. My grandfather was a jazz musician, and my aunt, his eldest daughter, was also a jazz musician. So I kind of grew up in jazz clubs, which is a very fun way to live as a kid. My stepfather wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times. He was an investigative reporter who was fascinated with the paranormal and was constantly going out and pursuing stories about local hauntings and UFOs, and they never ran in the paper. They were always denied because no one took that stuff seriously. And it was kind of my first exposure to the stigmatization of any serious discussion of these topics.
In 2010, Daniel partnered with actor Elijah Wood to create SpectreVision, a genre-driven company with a focus on psychological thriller and horror films. He's known for such films as Mandy, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and Color Out of Space. In 2024, they launched SpectreVision Radio, a bespoke podcast network at the intersection between the arts and the uncanny, featuring a tapestry of shows exploring creativity, the esoteric, and the unknown. Geist joined SpectreVision Radio in August. How cool is that? Naturally, he recorded this interview with me from an abandoned house in Laurel Canyon.
I think that my own relationship to the paranormal started pretty early, but I don't know that I was fully cognizant of it until I was much older. Whenever I'm telling my story, I have to choose between telling it the way I experienced it, meaning that it was only really when I was in my early 40s that I started to understand that a lot of things that had happened to me were probably not normal. But I guess in this case, maybe today I'll just kind of tell it as it happens. I think like a lot of people who have sensitivity, I had a lot of trauma as a kid. My parents divorced when I was very young. I moved around a lot. No sense of permanence, really. The very first experiences I had that maybe were beyond the normal were examples of very extreme empathy. Often said that I think there is a very fine line between empathy and clairvoyance. And actually, I'm not sure that it's really all that useful to draw a distinction between them because empathy and clairvoyance are the same act. It just sort of depends on, I suppose, how intense that part of you is. And for some reason, we've decided that when it crosses a certain threshold on the slide rule, we now call it supernatural, but it's all natural. It's all part of who we are. I used to always know how everyone was feeling around me. I still do, but I knew that as a kid. I remember once my mother's best friend was over. I was playing with her daughter, who was my best friend. I was probably 5 or 6 years old and barely had any ears on the conversation at all. I was busy doing whatever stupid thing 6-year-olds do. And when they left, I went to my mother and I said, "Why was Debbie so sad?" And I remember my mother was very perplexed. She said, "How did you know that she was sad?" And I don't know how I knew. I just knew. And she said that Debbie was getting a divorce. Looking back on that now, with what I understand, I think that was a very early example of the way that I am somehow very intensely tuned into the emotion that's happening around me in ways that maybe go beyond what's normal for most people. But I do remember that sometimes when the phone rang, I would know who it was before my mother answered. And I don't think I ever really thought about it. I didn't question it. I just thought that was how the phone worked. Sometimes when I was in bed drifting off to sleep, I would hear my grandmother say goodnight to me, and I would say goodnight back to her. But she didn't live in the same house as me. She lived a few miles away. But my grandmother, when I was around 18 years old, told me that she was a mystic. That was her word. And I said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "I just know things." For some reason, I didn't ask her any questions about this. I think that was part and parcel to the denial that I lived with for the first 40 years of my life. I just absolutely categorically did not want to deal with any of this stuff. And so when something like that would happen, rather than being curious, I wasn't curious about it. I was a very sensitive kid and a very scared kid. I had terrible, terrible fears. It was a huge part of my childhood. It was a very problematic part of my childhood. I think there was reasons for this fear that I am very slowly starting to understand, and I'm not there yet. And so I don't know that I'm ready to talk about it just yet. I think that there was maybe more going on than I realized then or even realize now.
So Daniel buried his secret as deep down as he could. But some things do not remain hidden.
I did have a deep love of and fascination with horror and tales of the supernatural and anything dark and macabre. I don't think I understood until much later that the reason I was attracted to that stuff was because it was real. And on some level, I knew that it was real. And so much so that I ended up deciding to dedicate my life to making that type of material and telling that type of story. It was actually after September 11th when horror started helping me process my trauma, because I was there. I was in New York. My roommate and I, who had been kind of afraid to leave the apartment, we finally decided to go see a movie. And we just wandered over to the local multiplex, and Jeepers Creepers had just opened. I started dreaming about the creeper, that he was chasing me. I realized the reason that I was obsessing about the creeper was that it was a perfect metaphor for 9/11. Right? Just kind of driving innocently along the road, and suddenly this, literally a big metal craft, starts aggressively and angrily trying to destroy the protagonist. I started understanding how horror had given me a platform to process this trauma and how therapeutic that was. I was already an aspiring filmmaker, but I had been a little bit all over the map with maybe what type of material I wanted to do. So that love of horror and my dedication to it brought me to Hollywood. I met Elijah Wood. We started SpectreVision, a horror company, and it worked. And we started putting movies out. Despite my deep love of horror and my the way that I valued it as a therapeutic platform, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in anything. I was extremely rigid about it. And in fact, I think I was even quite judgmental of anybody who believed in anything like that.
Little did he know, his newfound comfort in horror was about to lead him on a very necessary journey.
When you are a filmmaker in this space, you start getting invited to events that are staged at haunted locations. So in 2015, we were out at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado.
The Stanley Hotel is a massive colonial revival. It served as inspiration for Stephen King's 1977 novel The Shining and its 1980 film adaptation. It's reportedly very haunted.
Checked in, was there for the Stanley Film Festival. And when you check in, they give you this little speech about how it's haunted. And if you have an experience, they ask you to report it to the archive, because they have a big archive there's a whole room in the basement of reports people have filled out. And I thought it was ridiculous, and I thought it was a promotional gimmick. Festival passed. The last night, a few people had hung back, not gone back to LA yet, and we were like, let's all get together. We never get to see each other because we live in places all around the country. And so we all congregated in a room, and someone brought a Ouija board. I didn't want to do this. I was annoyed by it, but everyone was super excited. And so the Ouija board came out, and 4 people went on it, and they did the whole spiel. If there's a spirit in this room, etc. And then nothing happened. And I thought, okay, good, let's get on with this. And then they said, let's try a different 4. Still nothing happened. And then my number came up. So I went on the board. As soon as I got on, the planchette started flying around the board. It was the first time that I started to think, holy shit, this might be real, because the way it was moving, it defied any intuitive sense of how an object moves with 8 fingers lightly touching it. It was moving with incredible force. I could feel it pulling away from me at times. Really barely touched the thing because I wanted to make sure I wasn't unconsciously moving it. But it was moving with such ferocity that there's no way that any one of the 4 of us was able to do that. It just is impossible. It also started to behave in ways that were even more impossible. At one point, it started spinning. Our fingers never left it, but we were having to constantly reset them. And so it was like a game of Twister, kind of.
But then there was an energy shift.
I suddenly became aware of a feeling in the room of like an electrical charge. I had just come off of a series of traumas. I've often read that sometimes clairvoyant abilities open up after trauma, and I was right on the heels of all this. I felt like conductor of energy, hair on the back of your neck, standing up kind of feeling.
Then messages started coming through.
The messages that came through on the board were from a child named Ava, who described drowning in a lake and implied that her mother had let her drown. We started asking questions, and at one point asked, "Is there something you'd like us to do?" And the answer was, "Follow." And we said, "Follow where?" And the answer was 324. And then it was like someone had shut off a machine. You could just feel that it was over, that electrical charge just powered down. And a woman in the room was on her phone. She said, "Oh my God, you guys, room 324 is one of the most haunted rooms at the Stanley Hotel." It seemed like we were being compelled to go to room 324.
So the group ventured to room 324.
Now, the other thing was it's now about 2:30, 2:45 in the morning. We're going to go to room 324. It was just 4 of us. So we ascended this massive, creaky wood staircase. The Stanley Hotel was very dramatic. As we got to the landing, there was a couple standing there, and they were having a total meltdown. The woman was crying, and the guy, I still remember, he was like literally trying to pull his hair out. They said, "Don't come up here." And we went up anyway. We were like, "What happened?" And they were incoherent. They couldn't speak clearly. The woman kept saying, "We saw something, we saw something, we saw something." Finally, the guy kind of got his shit together, and he said, "We saw what looked like the figure of a child standing in the hallway." And we said, "Where?" And he said, "I'm not going down that hall." We said, "All right, we'll walk the hall and you tell us when we've reached the spot." And we did. And it was in front of room 324. The next day, a friend who had been in the room, who was a computer guy, he had somehow unearthed an article about a girl with that name would drown in a lake on this property. I think it was like the late 1800s or something. I went down to the archive to report what had happened, as I had been instructed to do when we checked in. And I said, "Hey, something happened. Can I fill out a form?" And they said, "Sure. What's the room number?" And it dawned on me, oh, they would have other records for this room. That's the whole point. So I said, "Can I look at your binder for room 324? And it was all these reports of this kid. I left there thinking, okay, there's one of 2 options. One, the Stanley Hotel just spent a bunch of money and recruited actors and drafted some of my own friends to trick me and maybe, some other people who are in this room. Or that was a ghost. The second option was a lot more plausible than the first. even after this, I still kind of really wasn't sure what to make of it. And I figured out how to kind of push it out of my consciousness.
More after this.
About 6 months later, we were invited to be guests on the Queen Mary.
The Queen Mary is a permanently docked, retired British ocean liner. Launched in 1934, during her service, the Queen Mary transported over 2 million passengers and approximately 810,000 members of the military during World War II.
A lot of people died on the ship over the years. There was once an accident where it sliced through a smaller ship and killed everybody. There were freak accidents. It's a huge ship, and over time, of course, things are going to happen. It is also reputed to be extremely haunted. And at that time, we were developing a movie that we were going to make about the Queen Mary. So we were invited to be, VIP guests. And we were there for a couple nights. And the first night we had dinner. And they said, tomorrow night, we've got our best ghost tour guy. He's going to come out. He's going to give you a private tour. But tonight, just enjoy, relax, explore. Took their advice and we explored a little too much. Discovered that the door to the lower decks where they give the tours was pretty easy to open. So we could let ourselves in, and we were wandering around this area where they give the ghost tours, and it's very spooky. It's made to be spooky. Feels a little bit like you're in like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. We finished it, and then we decided, let's keep going. So we went beyond the part that's made for the tour. And we were walking and walking and walking through the ship. The ship is huge. It's like a neighborhood. Eventually, we started hearing this incredibly loud metallic banging sound. It was coming from somewhere up ahead. And the closer we got, the louder it became. Eventually, we quite literally hit a wall. We hit the end of the line. There was nowhere left to go. And you could hear the banging was somewhere behind this wall. You could feel the vibration. I remember thinking, how is the hotel not hearing this? It's just so loud. And we said, okay, let's go back. Like in a horror movie, somehow we couldn't find our way back. We were like, did we come through this door or that door? We were totally lost. So we're stuck in the bowels of the haunted Queen Mary in the middle of the night with this incessant, deafening banging going on. And we finally find a little service elevator, and we're like, oh, thank God, because we're way down low. We need to get back up to the hotel. We're not sure if it's going to work. We press the button, and we hear this thing creaking from somewhere. And the door opens, and we get in, and it only goes down. So we're like, all right, the only way out is through. Let's see where this goes. So we press the button and, kind of shimmies down this elevator shaft, and the doors open. And now we're on the very, very lowest level of the ship. The next level down is the ocean. That's where we are. It's very unsafe down here. Clearly, we're not supposed to be here, but the banging is clearly originating in this area. We look up ahead and we see bright lights, like work lights, and we hear voices. We hear two men talking. And we all think, okay, they're doing construction. We're gonna get in trouble, but at least, we'll just say we got lost. It's gonna be fine. At least we can get back up stairs and get out of this hell that we're trapped in. We follow the sound of the banging and the voices, and eventually we kind of come to this archway. And I remember there's four of us. All four of us kind of froze as we approached this room on the other side of the archway. You could just feel something wrong. We powered through and we went into the room, and the voices just stopped suddenly. But the banging continued. We ended up crossing through the room and climbing up this little wall thing and hopping over a railing and getting back into the part of the public tour. And there was a big elevator there. We took it back up. And then hilariously, it spit us out into the haunted attraction that they do during Halloween. So we had to walk through all these zombies and pirates and stuff. And then we finally got out. The three people I was with, they had a Ouija board and they were like, let's go to the pool, because the pool is apparently an epicenter of the haunting. And let's do the Ouija board. And this was the first time that I realized, because this was number 2, this was about 6 months after the Stanley, that in both cases, everyone was seeing and hearing the same stuff. But that electrical charge feeling that I described, that wasn't being felt by everybody. That was being felt by me. The feeling at the Stanley was actually quite lovely. It was a very warm, cozy feeling. The Queen Mary felt really bad. It felt sick, kind of, and scary. And I said, guys, I'm out. This is really intense. And I'm scared. And I don't want to go to the pool and do a Ouija board. I'm going to bed. And I went back to my room and I'm feeling really scared. It's late, very late. And I'm trying to go to sleep, but I'm just so wound up. As I was lying there were 3 violent, deafening knocks on my door. Boom, boom, boom. I jolted. I was so afraid. My heart is pounding. I forced my body to get out of the bed and I opened the door and there was nobody there. I don't know what it was. I thought maybe it was my friends playing with me because I had told them I was scared. This is not very mature, but it's the only explanation I could think of. A little while later, my phone rings. I pick it up. It's just static.
A few moments later,
it rings again. Static.
And a few moments later,
rings a third time. I unplug it. So I barely slept that night. And in the morning, I went to breakfast with my friends. I said, very funny, you guys. And they said, what are you talking about? Now, if it was them 11 years later, they still haven't confessed. So then I went to the front desk and I said, listen, do you keep a call log? Do you keep a record of calls that go to rooms? And they said, of course we do. And I said, including like room to room calls? And they said, any call we will have a record of. And I said, great. Who called me last night? I got 3 calls. And they pulled up the record and there was no record of any calls going to my room. Now, when we were on the actual formal tour the following night, we had to pretend like we hadn't let ourselves in the night before. When we got to the end, we were actually adjacent to that room where we had heard the voices. And I asked the tour guide, have you ever had any experiences on the ship? He said, it's funny you should ask me that tonight because last night, all of us heard this incredibly loud banging coming out of that room right there. A month or 2 after the Queen Mary happened, one of the people that I'd been there with emailed a photograph. The night of our proper tour, we were taken to the room that is the storied, most haunted room on the ship, which is so haunted that they didn't even rent it out anymore because people would have these terrifying experiences there. My friend Lisa had taken snaps and photos of us in the room. And in one of them, on the very lower left corner, is what looks like a ghost hand, like pointing. It's white, smoky, ectoplasmic looking thing. completely blown away by this because that was my first time I had any photographic evidence. She had actually taken a series of photos in like sport mode or something from that one moment. And the next frame, the blobby pointing hand is now an open fist with fingers. You can see the streaks of movement. And then at that point, the dam had broken. And I think if I tell you every single thing that's happened to me, we're going to be here for a week. So at a certain point, I have to just kind of pull out to 10,000 feet and say, thus began the period of my life in which paranormal activity is just kind of a part of my day-to-day existence. That I also realized that it had been happening my whole life and that I had just been in ferocious denial about it. But it took me a long time to get there. 4 years later, something compelled me to say, let's watch an old episode of Unsolved Mysteries. We pull up the pilot, which I had never seen before. And lo and behold, it's about the Queen Mary. So they're talking all about the Queen Mary. And then they explained that they had sent some investigators in, that they had put a voice-activated recorder down in the lower part of the ship. And they played tape, and it's a deafening metallic banging and two men talking. It is exactly what we heard when we were there. Someone asked me once, like, you have all these paranormal experiences, and now I seek them out, like I go to haunted locations and I have all this equipment and shit. And like, they said, are you ever worried that you're going to like pick up a hitchhiker or something? I kind of like searched my feelings and I said, I can't explain to you what I'm about to say, but I think I'm protected. We live in a time when spirituality has been heavily suppressed, and even organized religion only goes so far. I still get really scared when stuff happens. It's something that I practice at, not allowing the fear to stop me from engaging with the phenomenon. As I said before, I had been cutting myself off from all of this because on some level I knew that once I looked at it, it would change my life, which it has. My whole life has changed as a result of this. I'm a person who makes movies and other things. Now I have a podcast network that you're on, and I feel a very heavy and real responsibility to advocate for a serious, respectful, and destigmatized open discussion about the paranormal.
Special thanks to Daniel Noah for sharing his story. Craving more spooky tales? Check out the lineup of fascinating shows on SpectreVision Radio. Channel available on Apple, streaming on Spotify, and available wherever you listen. Do you have a story you've been hiding? Submit it to us at hello.geist.podcast@gmail.com. Geist is edited and narrated by Danielle Matar. Original music and FX by Beau Jensen. Sound by Adam Esker. Geist logo is by Jake Carruthers. Follow us on all social media platforms at Geist_podcast. We want to say thank you to our fans that always anxiously wait for our episodes. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, sleep tight.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.